The afternoon sun blazed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Phoenix Elite Training Center, casting long shadows across the pristine hardwood floors. Diana Marshall adjusted her designer workout gear, checking her reflection in the mirrored walls one more time before beginning her live stream. At 28, she had perfected the art of building a brand around intimidation. "What's up, champions?" Diana's voice echoed through the state-of-the-art facility as she held her phone at the perfect angle. Day 47 of training for the Continental Championship. Remember, excellence isn't for everyone. Some people are just born to watch greatness from the sidelines. Her 2 million followers loved these daily affirmations of superiority. The comments flooded in immediately. "Queen Diana, nobody can touch you. Natural-born winner." Each notification fed something deep inside her that no amount of championship belts could satisfy. Diana had built her reputation on 2 pillars: undeniable skill in the ring and an even more undeniable talent for making opponents feel small before they ever threw a punch. Her pre-fight press conferences were legendary, not for discussing strategy, but for psychological warfare that left opponents defeated before the opening bell. The automatic doors of the training center whispered open, and a young woman stepped inside, clutching a folder against her chest. She wore simple black leggings and a faded university sweatshirt, her natural hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She paused just inside the entrance, taking in the gleaming equipment and the handful of trainers working with their athletes. Diana's eyes locked onto the newcomer immediately, her predatory instincts sensing fresh content for her social media empire. She ended her live stream with a promise to her followers. "Stay tuned, champions. Something interesting just walked in." The young woman approached the front desk, where Marcus Chen, the facility's head trainer, was reviewing schedules. "Excuse me," she said quietly, her voice carrying a slight accent. "I'm here for the community outreach program. My name is Amara Osei." Marcus looked up, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile. "Amara? Yes, we've been expecting you. Welcome to Phoenix Elite." He extended his hand, which she shook firmly. "The program starts next week, but I wanted you to come in today to get familiar with the facility and meet some of our trainers." Diana had already crossed the gym, her designer sneakers barely making a sound on the polished floor. She positioned herself directly in Amara's line of sight. Arms crossed, expression somewhere between amusement and disdain. "Community outreach?" Diana's voice dripped with condescension. "Marcus, I thought we talked about keeping the training environment focused. How am I supposed to prepare for the biggest fight of my career with distractions?" Amara met Diana's gaze steadily, something flickering in her dark eyes that the champion couldn't quite identify. It wasn't fear or intimidation. It was something else entirely, something that looked almost like recognition. "The community outreach program is fully funded by our board," Marcus replied, his tone firm. "It's part of our commitment to making boxing accessible to talented athletes, regardless of their financial situation." Amara here received a full scholarship based on her academic achievements and her documented interest in the sport. "Documented interest," Diana repeated, turning the words into mockery. "Let me guess, watched a few Rocky movies? Thinks she understands what it takes to step into a real ring?" She circled Amara slowly, like a shark, assessing prey. "Honey, boxing isn't about inspiration. It's about genetics, privilege, access to the best training from childhood. It's about being born for this." Amara remained silent, her hands relaxed at her sides. She had learned long ago that some battles couldn't be won with words. "You know what?" Diana's voice took on a theatrical quality as she pulled out her phone again. "This gives me an incredible idea. My followers would absolutely love this." She started recording. "Guys, we have a situation here. Someone from the community outreach program," she said the words, with exaggerated emphasis, "wants to train alongside professionals. What do you think? Should we give her a reality check?" The comments exploded across her screen. "Show her what real boxing looks like. These people need to understand their limitations. Give her a free lesson, Diana." Marcus stepped forward, his expression darkening. "Diana, that's enough. Amara is a guest here, and she deserves respect." Respect is earned, Diana interrupted, her eyes never leaving Amara. Tell you what, scholarship girl. Since you're so interested in boxing, how about a demonstration? You and me. 3 rounds. Nothing serious, just a friendly sparring session to show you what professional-level boxing actually looks like. She smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. Unless you'd rather watch from the sidelines where you belong? The gym had gone completely silent. Other trainers and athletes had stopped their work, sensing drama unfolding. Everyone knew Diana's reputation for crushing newcomers, for using sparring sessions as public executions of confidence. Amara looked down at the folder in her hands, her acceptance letter, her scholarship agreement, her carefully crafted plan for a new beginning in a new country. She had come to America from Ghana 6 months ago on an academic scholarship to study engineering. The boxing program was supposed to be a hobby, a way to stay active while focusing on her studies. But standing here, feeling the weight of Diana's contempt, something old and familiar stirred inside her. Something she had promised her mother she would leave behind in Accra. I accept, Amara said quietly. Diana's perfectly microbladed eyebrows shot up. What? I accept your challenge, Amara repeated, louder this time. 3 rounds. When would you like to schedule it? The champion laughed, a sharp sound that bounced off the mirrored walls. We're doing this right now. Unless you need time to prepare? The mockery in her voice was unmistakable. Now is fine, Amara replied. Marcus stepped between them, his expression troubled. Amara, you don't have to do this. Diana is a professional with years of experience. I understand, Amara interrupted gently. And I still accept. Something in her voice made Marcus pause. He had been training fighters for 35 years, since his own brief professional career ended with a detached retina. He had learned to read fighters, to see past bravado and fear to the truth underneath. And what he saw in Amara's eyes made him deeply uneasy, not for her safety, but for something else entirely. All right, he said slowly. But we do this properly. Regulation gloves, headgear, 3 2-minute rounds with 1-minute rests. I'll referee, and we stop immediately if anyone's in danger. Diana was already walking toward the equipment room, her phone camera following her every move. This is going to be epic, champions. Make sure you're watching my story in about 20 minutes. You're going to witness a life lesson being taught in real time. While Diana held court with her phone, narrating her preparation for her followers, Amara followed Marcus to the locker room. He handed her a pair of worn but serviceable gloves and protective headgear. Amara, Marcus said carefully, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Have you ever actually boxed before? Amara was quiet for a long moment, her fingers running over the gloves. Marcus felt relief wash over him. At least she wasn't going in completely blind. What does not exactly mean? It means, Amara said, meeting his eyes directly, that where I come from, we didn't call it boxing. We called it surviving. She paused. My father was a boxing trainer in Accra. He trained fighters in our neighborhood from the time I was 5 years old. I grew up in that gym, learning by watching, then learning by doing. So you do have experience, Marcus said, feeling slightly better about the situation. I have experience, Amara confirmed. But I came to America to leave that life behind. I wanted to focus on my education, on building a different future. She looked toward the gym, where Diana's voice could be heard, still narrating for her followers. But some people make it very clear that certain futures aren't meant for certain people. Marcus recognized the quiet fire in her voice. Amara, Diana is very good. She's undefeated in 23 professional fights. She has knockout power and speed that she has privilege. Amara interrupted softly. She has confidence built on never really being challenged. She has talent that's never been tested by desperation. She pulled on the gloves, flexing her fingers. I'm not here to win, Marcus. I'm here to show her that respect isn't given based on where someone was born or how much money they have. Respect is earned by how you carry yourself when someone tries to make you feel less than you are. As Amara walked out toward the ring, Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen that look before, in the eyes of fighters who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Diana was already in the ring, dancing around, throwing shadow punches for her phone camera, which she had propped up in the corner. Several gym members had gathered, phones out, ready to capture what they assumed would be a one-sided destruction. Ready to learn why some people are just naturally better? Diana called out as Amara climbed through the ropes. Amara didn't respond. She moved to her corner, rolled her shoulders once, and waited. Marcus climbed into the ring, positioning himself between them. 3 rounds, 2 minutes each. Keep it clean, protect yourselves at all times, and obey my commands. Touch gloves. Diana extended her gloves with a smirk. Amara touched them without expression. All right, Marcus said, stepping back. Box. Diana came out aggressively, as everyone expected. She threw a quick jab combination, testing Amara's reflexes. The strikes whistled through empty air. Amara had moved not frantically, not desperately, but with an economy of motion that spoke of muscle memory built over years. She had simply not been where Diana expected her to be. Diana frowned and tried again, this time with more power behind her cross. Again, Amara flowed away from the punches, like water around stone. Stand still, Diana snapped, frustration creeping into her voice. For the first time since entering the ring, Amara spoke. In the neighborhood where I learned to box, she said quietly, her voice barely carrying over the sound of their footwork. Standing still meant getting hurt. We learned to move first, strike second. She demonstrated with a lightning-quick jab that caught Diana on the shoulder, not hard enough to hurt, but precise enough to make a point. Diana's eyes widened. That punch had been fast, faster than she expected. The champion came forward again, this time abandoning caution for aggression. She threw a combination that would have overwhelmed most amateur fighters. But Amara wasn't most fighters. What happened next made everyone in the gym lean forward. Amara slipped inside Diana's guard. Her movements so smooth, they seemed choreographed. She delivered 3 body shots in rapid succession. Professional, controlled, and absolutely precise. Not enough to cause real damage, but enough to completely shock Diana. The champion stumbled backward, touching her ribs in disbelief. What the Diana started to say, but Marcus's voice cut through. 30 seconds. Diana shook her head, trying to clear it. This wasn't possible. This girl with her community outreach scholarship and her quiet demeanor was actually landing punches. Real punches. She charged forward again, but this time without her usual calculation. Anger and disbelief made her sloppy. Amara ducked under a wild hook and countered with an uppercut that snapped Diana's head back. Not hard enough to knock her out, but hard enough to send a clear message. Time, Marcus called, stepping between them. Diana stumbled to her corner, breathing hard, her carefully styled hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. Across the ring, Amara stood calmly, barely winded. The gym was completely silent. Phones were still recording, but now the footage told a very different story than anyone had anticipated. Marcus looked at Amara with new eyes, understanding beginning to dawn. Amara, he said quietly as they reset for round 2. Who exactly are you? Amara glanced at Diana, who was receiving frantic instructions from her training team, her confidence visibly shaken. I'm someone, Amara replied softly, who learned a long time ago that the quietest storms are often the most powerful. The bell rang for round 2, and Diana Marshall, undefeated professional champion, was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous opponents are the ones you never saw coming. The second round began with Diana Marshall attempting to regain her composure and the psychological advantage she had built her entire career upon. She came out of her corner with renewed aggression, determined to prove that the first round had been nothing more than a fortunate accident, a momentary lapse in her concentration, rather than a genuine display of skill from her opponent. She threw a powerful combination, her gloves cutting through the air with the precision that had earned her championship titles and lucrative sponsorship deals. But once again, Amara Osei moved with that same unsettling fluidity that seemed to anticipate every strike before it was fully formed. The champion's punches found nothing but empty space, and the frustration that flickered across Diana's face was becoming impossible to hide from the dozens of phones recording every moment of this unexpected confrontation. Marcus Chen watched from his position as referee, his experienced eyes catching details that the casual observers missed entirely. Amara's footwork was extraordinary, displaying a level of technical sophistication that typically required years of professional coaching to develop. She moved in small, efficient circles, never wasting energy, never committing fully to any position until she had established complete control of the distance between herself and her opponent. Her guard was tight but not rigid, adaptive rather than static, responding to Diana's attacks with the kind of reflexive intelligence that couldn't be taught in any gym. Marcus had seen thousands of fighters over his decades in the sport, but there was something different about Amara's style. Something that spoke of learning boxing not as a sport or a craft, but as an absolute necessity for survival. This wasn't the boxing of points and decisions and strategic positioning for judges' scorecards. This was the boxing of someone who had learned that mistakes had consequences far more serious than losing a match or disappointing sponsors. Diana threw a heavy cross that would have ended the sparring session if it had connected, but Amara slipped to the side with minimal movement, her head shifting just enough to let the glove pass harmlessly by her ear. In that same fluid motion, she stepped inside Diana's guard and delivered a precise combination to the body. 3 punches that landed with sharp accuracy on the champion's ribs, each one placed with the kind of anatomical precision that demonstrated deep understanding of human vulnerability. Diana grunted, the air forced from her lungs, and for the first time in her professional career, she felt something she had never experienced in a ring before that moment. Genuine uncertainty about the outcome of a fight. This wasn't supposed to happen. The script was clear. Had always been clear. She was Diana Marshall, undefeated champion, social media icon with millions of followers, the fighter that sponsors paid premium rates to associate with their brands. The young woman across from her was supposed to be nothing more than content, another example of why natural superiority combined with professional training would always triumph over ambition, unsupported by proper background and resources. The phones surrounding the ring captured every moment in high definition. But the narrative being recorded was nothing like what Diana had promised her followers. The comments on her live stream were changing rapidly, shifting from confident predictions of dominant victory to confused questions about who this unknown fighter actually was. Who is this girl? One comment read, "She's actually landing punches on Diana," wrote another. "This doesn't look like an amateur," appeared multiple times in various forms. Diana's training team, standing outside the ring, exchanged worried glances, recognizing that what was unfolding represented more than just an unexpected challenge in a casual sparring session. If this footage spread beyond Diana's controlled social media channels, if the narrative shifted from champion teaching a lesson to champion being genuinely challenged by an unknown fighter, the implications for her carefully constructed brand could be devastating. Amara pressed forward, not with the wild aggression of someone seeking to overwhelm their opponent, but with the calculated patience of a fighter who understood that real dominance came from control rather than chaos. She threw a jab that caught Diana clean on the nose, not hard enough to cause real damage but precise enough to make the champion's eyes water. Diana stumbled backward, shaking her head, trying to clear her vision, and in that moment of vulnerability, Amara could have followed up with a combination that might have ended the sparring session entirely. Instead, she stepped back, allowing Diana space to recover. And that restraint spoke volumes about her character and her true purpose in accepting this challenge. She wasn't here to destroy Diana Marshall, to humiliate her, or end her career. She was here to prove a point that had nothing to do with dominance and everything to do with dignity. Marcus called time, ending the second round, and both fighters returned to their corners, Diana's team surrounded her immediately, offering water, advice, desperate strategies to salvage a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond their control. "She's just lucky," one trainer insisted, wiping sweat from Diana's face. "You're letting her get in your head. Third round, you go back to basics. Use your reach advantage. Don't let her inside." But Diana barely heard them. She was staring across the ring at Amara, who sat calmly on her stool, breathing steadily, showing no signs of the exhaustion that typically accompanied 2 rounds of intense sparring. The champion realized with growing horror that Amara had been holding back, that those precise body shots and that lightning-quick jab represented not the full extent of her capabilities, but merely a demonstration of competence, a measured response to disrespect rather than an all-out assault. During the 1-minute rest period, Marcus approached Amara's corner, keeping his voice low enough that the surrounding crowd couldn't hear. "Amara, I need to understand something. That fighting style, that precision, those aren't the skills of someone who just watched their father train other people. You've had serious instruction, haven't you?" Amara was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant, as if she were seeing something beyond the pristine walls of Phoenix Elite Training Center, beyond the expensive equipment and the curious crowd with their recording phones. "My father wasn't just a trainer," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was a former national champion in Ghana, someone who represented our country in international competitions before an injury ended his career. After he retired from fighting, he opened a small gym in our neighborhood in Accra, a place where young people could learn discipline and self-defense and find purpose beyond the limited opportunities our community offered. I grew up in that gym, literally. My mother would bring me there after school. And while other children played, I watched my father teach. By the time I was 7, I was hitting the heavy bag. By 9, I was sparring with boys twice my size. By 12, I was better than most of the adult fighters in our gym." She paused, her expression becoming more serious, more weighted with memories that clearly carried pain alongside pride. "But women's boxing in Ghana, in our specific community, wasn't considered appropriate. My father received criticism for training me. People saying he was wasting his knowledge on a daughter who should be focusing on domestic skills rather than fighting. When I was 15, I won an underground tournament against adult women, and the backlash against my father became intense. People stopped sending their children to his gym, saying he was promoting improper behavior, teaching girls to be violent rather than gentle. The gym eventually had to close. And my father fell into depression, believing he had failed both his community and his family. I promised him, and my mother, that I would never fight again, that I would focus entirely on academics, and use my education to build a respectable life that wouldn't bring shame or controversy to our family. When I received the scholarship to study engineering in America, everyone celebrated it as a fresh start, a chance to leave behind that difficult chapter of our lives." Marcus listened, understanding beginning to flood through him about exactly what was happening in this ring. "So, why are you fighting now? Why break that promise?" Amara's eyes found Diana across the ring, the champion who was still receiving frantic instructions from her team, still believing that strategy and professional experience would be enough to overcome what she had so far encountered. "Because that promise was made when I thought respect could be earned through silence, through making myself smaller, through accepting other people's definitions of my worth and my place." Diana Marshall looked at me today and saw someone to be mocked, someone whose scholarship and background and dreams were worth less than content for her social media followers. She didn't see a person deserving of basic dignity. She saw an opportunity to reinforce her own sense of superiority, to remind her audience that some people are simply born better than others. "I'm not breaking my promise out of anger or revenge. I'm breaking it because I finally understand that sometimes silence isn't peace. It's just another form of accepting injustice." The bell rang for the third and final round, and both fighters moved to the center of the ring. Diana came forward with everything she had left, throwing combinations with desperate intensity, trying to land the knockout blow that would salvage her reputation and restore the natural order that this sparring session had so dramatically disrupted. But Amara had stopped holding back entirely. She moved with a grace and power that transcended mere technical skill, demonstrating why her father had once believed she could have become one of the greatest fighters Ghana had ever produced. She slipped Diana's wild hook, countered with a perfect straight right that snapped the champion's head back, followed immediately with a left hook to the body that made Diana's legs buckle. The champion tried to clinch, to buy time, but Amara gently pushed her away and reset her stance, giving Diana another chance to defend herself with dignity rather than finishing the fight with the brutal efficiency she clearly possessed. The realization hit Diana Marshall like a physical blow, more devastating than any punch. This young woman from Ghana, this scholarship student she had mocked and dismissed, was consciously choosing not to humiliate her, was showing her more mercy and respect than she had ever shown to any of the opponents she had defeated and taunted throughout her career. Amara could have knocked her out. The skill was clearly there, the power evident in every controlled strike. But instead, she was offering something far more valuable than victory. She was offering a lesson about true strength, about the difference between dominance achieved through privilege and respect earned through character. Tears began to mix with the sweat on Diana's face, not from pain but from the crushing weight of understanding exactly who she had become, exactly what her platform and her privilege had turned her into over the years of building her brand on making others feel small. Marcus saw it happening. That rare moment when someone's entire self-perception crumbles and rebuilds simultaneously. "Time," he called. Even though 30 seconds remained on the clock, the sparring session was over. Not because of a knockout or a technical stoppage, but because the real fight had already been decided in a way that had nothing to do with punches landed or defensive maneuvers executed. Diana stood in the center of the ring, her gloves hanging at her sides, looking at Amara with an expression that had traveled from arrogance through confusion and anger and fear, to arrive finally at something resembling humility. Amara removed her headgear, her natural hair slightly damp with sweat but her breathing still remarkably controlled, and extended her glove toward Diana in a gesture of respect that the champion had never offered to anyone in her entire professional career. Diana touched gloves, and then, to the absolute shock of everyone present, she removed her own headgear and spoke loud enough for the entire gym to hear, loud enough for all those recording phones to capture clearly. "I need everyone here to understand something. I came into this session believing I was going to teach a lesson about natural superiority, about why some people deserve to be champions and others deserve to watch from the sidelines. Instead, I just learned that I've been wrong about almost everything that I thought made me successful. Amara Osei just demonstrated more real skill, more genuine strength, and more authentic class than I've shown in my entire career. I owe her an apology. I owe everyone watching an apology. And I owe myself the honesty to admit that my success has made me forget the most important lesson any fighter should learn. Respect is never about where you come from or how much money you have or how many followers watch your social media. Respect is about how you treat people, especially people you believe have less power than you." The gym remained completely silent for several long seconds before someone began to clap. Then another person joined, and within moments, the entire facility was erupting in applause. Not for Diana, though her words had begun a journey toward redemption that would take far longer than any sparring session. The applause was for Amara, for the quiet dignity she had maintained, for the lesson she had taught without words about the difference between proving yourself and destroying someone else. Marcus climbed into the ring and raised Amara's hand in a symbolic gesture of victory. But Amara gently lowered it and instead walked over to Diana, speaking quietly enough that only the champion could hear. "You have a platform that reaches millions of people. You have influence and resources and opportunities that most fighters never receive. Those gifts aren't wrong, but what you do with them matters. You can use your voice to lift people up or tear them down. You can use your success to open doors or keep them closed. The choice has always been yours, and it still is." Diana nodded, wiping her eyes, and in that moment, she made a decision that would change the trajectory of her career and her life. She picked up her phone, the same device she had used just an hour earlier to mock Amara's scholarship and background. and she began recording a new message for her followers. Champions, I need to tell you something that's hard for me to admit. For years, I've built my brand on making other people feel inferior, on using my success as a weapon to keep others in their place. Today, I met someone who showed me what real strength looks like. Amara Osei just outboxed me in every way that matters. Not because she trained harder or had better genetics, but because she carries herself with a dignity and purpose that I've lost somewhere along the way. I'm not going to delete my earlier videos mocking her. I'm going to leave them up as a reminder of who I was and what I need to change. And I'm going to use my platform differently from now on. Not to tear people down, but to celebrate the kind of strength and character that Amara demonstrated today. The video, when she posted it 20 minutes later, went viral in a way that none of her previous content ever had. Within hours, it had been viewed millions of times, shared across every social media platform, discussed on sports news programs and mainstream media outlets. The narrative wasn't about an undefeated champion being upset by an unknown fighter. The narrative was about humility, about growth, about the courage it takes to admit you've been wrong, and the strength required to change publicly when millions of people are watching. Comments flooded in, some praising Diana's honesty, others criticizing her for needing to be defeated before learning basic respect, but all of them discussing the deeper questions her apology raised about privilege, access, and the responsibility that comes with having a platform that reaches so many people. Amara, meanwhile, quietly declined the multiple interview requests that began arriving almost immediately. She had never sought fame or recognition, had never wanted to become a symbol or a viral moment. She had simply wanted to be treated with basic respect, to pursue her engineering degree, and participate in a boxing program without being mocked or diminished because of her background. But Marcus Chen, recognizing that Amara's story represented something far more significant than a single sparring session, approached her with a proposition that would test whether her victory over Diana Marshall was merely a personal triumph or the beginning of something much larger. Amara, I know you came here to focus on your studies, to leave fighting behind, but what happened today matters. Not just because you demonstrated exceptional skill, but because of how you handled victory with grace that most people never learn. I've been in this sport for 35 years, and I've never seen anyone with your combination of technical ability and genuine character. I'm asking you to consider training seriously, not to become famous or wealthy, but to show young people, especially young women, from communities that don't typically produce professional athletes, that their backgrounds don't define their ceilings. Amara was quiet for a long time, considering the weight of what Marcus was offering and what accepting would mean for the promise she had made to her parents, for the future she had carefully planned, for the person she had been trying to become since arriving in America. Finally, she spoke. Her words measured and thoughtful as always. I'll need to think about it, Marcus, and I'll need to talk to my parents. But I can tell you this. If I do decide to train seriously, it won't be to prove I'm better than anyone else. It will be to prove that where we come from doesn't determine where we can go. And that real strength isn't about making others feel small. It's about lifting everyone up together. That evening, as Amara sat in her small apartment, video calling her parents in Accra on the unreliable internet connection she shared with 3 other students, she told them what had happened. Her father's face appeared on the screen, older and more worn than she remembered from just 6 months ago. And when she finished describing the sparring session and Diana's apology and Marcus's offer, he was silent for a long moment before speaking. Amara, when I taught you to box, I never imagined it would follow you across the ocean. I thought we had left that part of our lives behind, but perhaps I was wrong to ask you to suppress such a fundamental part of who you are. Perhaps real dignity isn't about hiding our gifts, but using them with wisdom and restraint, exactly as you did today. 6 months after the sparring session that had been witnessed by hundreds in person and millions online, the landscape of women's boxing had shifted in ways that no one could have predicted. Diana Marshall stood in the office of her new manager, reviewing contracts that represented not her return to championship boxing, but something entirely different and potentially more significant than any title she had previously held. The walls of the office were covered with photographs of fighters from decades past, legends who had used their platforms to create change beyond the ropes. And Diana found herself studying these images with a new understanding of what legacy actually meant. Her previous manager had dropped her immediately after the viral video, citing concerns about brand damage and sponsor relationships, but what he had seen as career suicide had actually opened doors to opportunities that aligned with the person Diana was trying to become, rather than the persona she had built her success upon. The new contracts spread across the desk represented partnerships with organizations focused on youth development, anti-bullying campaigns, and initiatives designed to make boxing accessible to communities that had traditionally been excluded from the sport. And while the financial terms were significantly less lucrative than her previous sponsorship deals, Diana signed each document with a sense of purpose she had never experienced during the height of her championship reign. The transformation hadn't been easy or immediate. The weeks following her public apology had been brutal in ways that physical training never was. Her social media following had fractured dramatically, with roughly half her audience applauding her honesty and growth, while the other half accused her of weakness, of betraying the very qualities that had made her successful, of becoming another casualty of what they perceived as excessive political correctness. Her comment sections became battlegrounds, where people argued about privilege, respect, accountability, and whether public figures had any obligation to be role models beyond their primary talents. Diana had been tempted countless times to delete everything, to retreat from social media entirely, to find some way to rebuild her career away from the constant scrutiny and judgment that accompanied every post she made. But Amara's words kept echoing in her mind. The quiet statement that Diana's platform reached millions of people, and that what she chose to do with that influence mattered more than temporary comfort or universal approval. So, Diana had persisted, documenting her journey toward becoming better with the same transparency she had once used to promote her superiority, sharing not highlights and victories but struggles and setbacks and the uncomfortable process of examining beliefs she had held without question for most of her life. Meanwhile, Amara Osei had made her own difficult decision about the path forward. After weeks of conversation with her parents, lengthy discussions with Marcus Chen about what serious training would require, and honest self-reflection about her motivations and goals, she had agreed to pursue boxing professionally while simultaneously continuing her engineering studies. The arrangement was unconventional and demanding, requiring her to wake at 4:30 each morning for training before classes, to study between afternoon sessions at the gym, to carefully balance the physical demands of athletic training with the intellectual rigor of her engineering program. Many people told her it was impossible, that she would need to choose between academics and athletics, that trying to excel in both domains simultaneously would result in failure in both. But Amara had grown up learning that impossible often just meant difficult for people who have the luxury of choosing easier paths. And she approached the challenge with the same quiet determination that had Dong Mater characterized every obstacle she had faced since leaving Ghana. Marcus had connected her with sponsors who believed in her story and her potential, companies that saw value in supporting an athlete who represented education and discipline and the kind of authentic strength that transcended any single sport. And while the financial support was modest compared to what established champions received, it was enough to allow Amara to quit one of her 3 part-time jobs and dedicate those hours to training instead. The boxing community watched Amara's development with fascination and growing respect. Marcus had entered her in several amateur tournaments to build her official record and give her experience in sanctioned competition, and she had moved through her weight class with the kind of dominance that reminded veteran observers of generational talents. But what set Amara apart wasn't just her technical skill or her remarkable ability to read opponents and adjust strategy mid-fight. It was the way she carried herself outside the ring, the grace she showed toward opponents after victories, the time she spent volunteering at youth boxing programs in underserved communities, the the tutoring sessions she conducted for young people struggling with mathematics and science courses. She became a symbol not of boxing excellence alone, but of holistic achievement, of the possibility that strength could coexist with gentleness, that competitive drive could be balanced with genuine compassion for others. Sports journalists who interviewed her quickly learned that she deflected questions about her own accomplishments, preferring instead to discuss the importance of education, the value of discipline, the ways that structured athletic programs could provide young people with purpose and direction during difficult periods of their lives. The rematch happened not in anger or revenge, but as the natural culmination of two very different journeys towards self-understanding. Diana had worked her way back through the professional ranks after her public humbling, taking fights against tough opponents without the media spectacle and trash-talking that had characterized her earlier career. She won most of these bouts through solid technical boxing rather than dramatic knockouts. And while her record improved and her skills remained sharp, something fundamental had changed in how she approached competition. She no longer sought to destroy opponents or humiliate them into submission. Instead, she treated each fight as a test of her own capabilities, a measurement of her growth as both a fighter and a person. When Marcus approached her team about a professional bout against Amara, now 18 months after their first encounter and with Amara holding an undefeated record in sanctioned amateur and early professional competition, Diana's response surprised everyone involved. She didn't demand special financial terms or insist on conditions designed to provide her with advantages. Instead, she asked only that a significant portion of the fight proceeds be directed toward establishing a joint foundation, an organization that would bear both their names and focus on creating boxing opportunities for young women from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, regardless of their race, nationality, or previous access to quality training facilities. The announcement of the fight generated enormous media attention, but the narrative had shifted entirely from their first encounter. This wasn't being promoted as a grudge match or an opportunity for Diana to reclaim her reputation through dominance. Instead, the fight was framed as a celebration of growth, a demonstration that competition could exist alongside mutual respect, that two athletes could push each other toward excellence without diminishing each other's humanity in the process. The pre-fight press conferences were unlike anything the boxing world had seen before, with both women discussing not their advantages over their opponent, but their admiration for each other's journey and their shared commitment to using the platform the fight provided to advocate for expanded opportunities in women's sports. When reporters tried to bait them into trash-talking or making predictions that would create controversy and drive ticket sales, both Diana and Amara consistently redirected the conversation toward the foundation they were building together, toward the young fighters who would benefit from the programs they were creating, toward the responsibility they felt to model a different kind of athletic excellence that valued character as highly as physical capability. The fight itself took place on a warm evening in Atlanta, in an arena filled beyond capacity with spectators, who had come to witness something they sensed was historically significant, beyond the outcome of any single sporting event. In one corner stood Diana Marshall, the former champion who had built and then dismantled an empire of arrogance, who had learned through painful public failure that true strength required vulnerability and growth rather than just physical dominance. In the other corner stood Amara Osei, the engineering student from Ghana, who had never sought the spotlight, but had accepted the responsibility that came with being seen, who carried the dreams of her family and her community while maintaining the humility that characterized everything she did. The tale of the tape showed that Diana had advantages in reach and professional experience, that her knockout percentage remained impressive despite her stylistic evolution. But the numbers couldn't capture the intangibles that would determine the fight's outcome, the hunger and discipline that had defined Amara's entire life, the technical brilliance she had inherited from her father and refined through years of training that began long before anyone outside her Accra neighborhood knew her name. The opening bell rang, and both fighters met in the center of the ring with a touch of gloves that carried genuine respect rather than mere ritual. Diana opened with careful jabs, testing distance and timing, showing none of the wild aggression that had characterized their first encounter. She had studied countless hours of Amara's recent fights, had worked with her training team to develop strategies that might neutralize the speed and precision that made the younger fighter so dangerous, and her approach reflected thoughtful preparation rather than assumptions of inherent superiority. Amara responded with patient defense, allowing Diana to establish her rhythm while gathering information about subtle changes in the champion's style, looking for patterns and tendencies that would reveal opportunities for counterattacking. The first round was tactical and measured, with both fighters demonstrating respect for their opponent's capabilities, and when the bell rang to end the round, the crowd applauded not because of dramatic action, but because of the obvious skill and intelligence both women were displaying. The middle rounds became a chess match of the highest order, with Diana using her experience to control range and pace, attempting to turn the fight into the kind of technical battle where her veteran savvy might provide advantages that pure athleticism couldn't overcome. She worked behind a disciplined jab, moving laterally to prevent Amara from establishing the angles she preferred, occasionally throwing power punches that forced the younger fighter to respect her knockout capability. But Amara adjusted beautifully, demonstrating the ring intelligence that separated truly elite fighters from merely talented ones. She began to anticipate Diana's patterns, to recognize the subtle weight shifts that preceded specific combinations, and she started landing counters with increasing frequency and authority. A perfectly timed right hand caught Diana flush on the chin in the fifth round, and while the former champion's legs held and she survived the moment, everyone watching recognized that Amara possessed not just technical superiority, but genuine finishing power. The championship rounds became a testament to both women's character and conditioning. Diana, knowing she was likely behind on the scorecards and facing an opponent who showed no signs of fatigue, could have reverted to the desperate tactics of their first encounter, could have abandoned technique for wild aggression in hopes of landing a lucky punch that might change the fight's trajectory. Instead, she continued to box intelligently, to look for clean opportunities rather than reckless exchanges, to demonstrate that losing with dignity was more important than winning through abandonment of principle. Amara, sensing that victory was within reach, could have coasted through the final rounds, protecting her lead rather than taking risks. But that had never been her way. She continued to press forward with calculated aggression, to seek decisive moments rather than comfortable margins, to show the arena and the millions watching around the world that her excellence came not from caution but from confidence in her preparation and abilities. The final bell rang after 12 rounds of boxing that would be discussed and analyzed for years to come, not because of any single dramatic moment or controversial decision, but because of the cumulative excellence both women had displayed and the powerful message their mutual respect had sent about competition and character. The judges' scorecards were unanimous, all three officials awarding the fight to Amara Osei by comfortable but not overwhelming margins, recognizing her superior speed, accuracy, and ring generalship while acknowledging that Diana Marshall had fought with courage and skill throughout. When the referee raised Amara's hand in victory, she immediately turned to Diana and embraced her, the two women standing together in the center of the ring while photographers captured an image that would become iconic in sports history. Two athletes from vastly different backgrounds, who had begun their relationship with conflict and disrespect, now standing together as partners in demonstrating that strength and grace could coexist, that competition could elevate rather than diminish, that real victory had nothing to do with making opponents feel small, and everything to do with inspiring everyone watching to become larger versions of themselves. In the post-fight interviews, Diana spoke with genuine emotion about the honor of sharing the ring with Amara, about how the preparation for this rematch had taught her more about boxing and life than all her previous fights combined, about her excitement for the foundation they were building together, and the young fighters whose lives would be changed by the opportunities that foundation would create. Amara, characteristically, spent most of her interview time thanking everyone who had supported her journey, from her parents in Ghana, who had sacrificed everything to give her opportunities, to Marcus Chen, who had recognized her potential and guided her development, to Diana Marshall, who had provided her with the platform to share a message about dignity and respect that transcended any sport. When a reporter asked Amara what she wanted people to remember about this fight and this story, She paused thoughtfully before responding with words that would be quoted and shared millions of times across social media and traditional news outlets in the days that followed. "I want people to understand that this story was never really about boxing," Amara said, her voice steady and clear, despite the physical exhaustion evident in her appearance. "It was about what happens when we judge people based on assumptions rather than giving them the respect every human being deserves." Diana looked at me 6 months ago and saw someone she could diminish, someone whose dreams and dignity were less important than content for her followers. But the truth is that every person you meet, regardless of their background or their current circumstances, carries stories and strengths and potential that you cannot see just by looking at them. The greatest victories in life don't come from defeating other people. They come from defeating the parts of ourselves that want to believe we're superior, that want to build our success on making others feel inferior, that want to use our advantages to keep others down rather than lift everyone up together. Diana and I are standing here today not as enemy and victim, not as winner and loser, but as two women who learned from each other, who grew through our conflict, and who are now committed to using whatever influence this sport has given us to create opportunities for the next generation of fighters who deserve to have their talents recognized, regardless of where they were born or how much money their families have. The foundation they established together became one of the most successful sports-based youth development programs in the country, eventually expanding internationally to create training facilities and scholarship opportunities in communities across Africa, Latin America, and underserved areas throughout the United States. Young women who would never have had access to quality coaching or competition opportunities found themselves learning not just boxing technique, but life skills, academic tutoring, mentorship, and pathways to education that extended far beyond athletics. Diana dedicated herself fully to the foundation's work, using her social media platform to amplify the stories of young fighters overcoming obstacles and achieving dreams that society had told them were impossible. She never won another championship belt, but she found something far more valuable in the work of creating opportunities for others, and in the knowledge that her legacy would be measured not by titles accumulated, but by lives changed. Amara continued to dominate her weight class while simultaneously completing her engineering degree, becoming the first professional boxer to graduate summa cum laude from her university's engineering program. And her story inspired countless young people to reject false choices between academic excellence and athletic achievement, to believe that dedication and discipline could unlock potential in multiple domains simultaneously. Years later, when sports historians discussed the sparring session that began this entire journey, they focused less on the technical details of what had happened in the ring and more on the cultural moment it represented, the way it had crystallized important conversations about privilege, respect, and the responsibility that comes with having platforms that reach millions of people. The video of Diana's original mocking of Amara, followed by the sparring session, and then Diana's tearful apology, became required viewing in sports management and ethics courses, used as a case study about reputation, character, and the ways that social media could both amplify harmful behaviors and facilitate genuine accountability and growth. But perhaps the most powerful legacy was simply the thousands of young women who found their way to boxing gyms and training facilities because they had seen Amara's story and recognized that their backgrounds didn't define their ceilings. That quiet strength could be just as powerful as loud confidence. That dignity and excellence could coexist in ways that transformed not just individuals, but entire communities. The story of Diana Marshall and Amara Osei became more than just a boxing narrative. It became a parable about human potential, about the ways that prejudice limits not just those who are targeted, but also those who carry it, about how genuine strength requires the courage to admit when we're wrong and the commitment to become better, even when that transformation is difficult and public and uncomfortable. It demonstrated that competition, at its best, brings out excellence in everyone involved, that worthy opponents make us stronger, not through their weakness, but through pushing us to discover capabilities we didn't know we possessed. Most importantly, it proved that redemption is possible, that growth is always available to those willing to do the uncomfortable work of examining their beliefs and behaviors and that the most inspiring victories are those that elevate everyone rather than diminishing anyone. In quiet training facilities and prestigious gyms, in community centers and elite athletic complexes, young fighters trained with renewed purpose, carrying with them the understanding that their strength would be measured not just by punches thrown and opponents defeated, but by the grace and dignity they brought to every encounter, by their willingness to lift others while climbing toward their own dreams, and by their commitment to using whatever success they achieved to expand opportunities for those still fighting to be seen, respected, and given the chance to demonstrate that excellence has no boundaries except those we artificially impose through prejudice and limited imagination. The end.